Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, Mark, like a job for me.
Where's the goodies?
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Now in 2019, you're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. From executive producers Simon Kinberg and Jordan Peele comes the reimagining of a worldwide phenomenon, the all-new Twilight Zone.
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. This is Douglas Viviani with the rather dusk David Cohen.
Dusk.
Dusk. The best I could do. That's
I didn't know that was an adjective. That's a new one.
It's another word or a way to describe twilight, if you will.
Yeah, no, I know that.
Oh, okay. So, and that's what we're focusing a smidge on here today and next week. Do you want to just focus and think about Twilight Zone has been around and is celebrating its 60th year since its original broadcast this year.
Wow.
I mean, that's amazing. And now we just heard there that there's going to be a reincarnation.
Reimagining. If I hear that word one more time, Doug, I'm telling you.
Let's hope it's not a reimagining. Let's hope that they stick to the original formula.
Yeah.
And prove that everything old is new again. And if you build upon the foundation of the entertainment of the past and don't lose sight of what made it successful, you'll have a great run with the brand new Twilight Zone on CBS All Access. Just an example that everything old is new again and that we're on the right, I think, wavelength here. It's been consistently on television, this Twilight Zone, for 55 years of reruns. There were 2 incarnations television shows, 85, 2002. There was 1 movie in 83. It's been on the radio, by the way, Stacy Keach as the host since 2002. And it's honored in Disney with a Twilight Zone Tower of Terror ride. Why do I say this? Why do I talk about Twilight Zone? And are we only going to be talking about Twilight Zone today?
We are not, because this week and next we're going to explore all things Rod Serling, creator of the Twilight Zone, which included that, but also so much more, because joining us on this journey in time is author Nicholas Parisi, who is here with us in the studio to talk about his book, Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon or your local bookstore.
Well, and also Nicholas serves on the board of directors of the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to preserving and promoting Rod Serling's legacy. He's also, and this will come into play in a few minutes, or maybe the next show actually, a former staff writer and editor for a magazine we've mentioned before, related to our high school band, the Good Times magazine, from and on Long Island. Welcome, after all of that, Nick Parisi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Doug. I'm very happy to be here, and good to see you, Dave.
There we
Same
go.
here.
We met over at the Long Island Geek Convention. If you go back on our YouTube, version of the show, you could see on our YouTube channel the Geek Convention, and we saw Nick there promoting his book, which, by the way, I have a copy here that I'm going to ask to be autographed later on. On the air, I'm saying that. He's going to on the air.
You can ask for it.
Can't say no.
What's the answer? Oh, he said so. Now you have it. We will be walking away with an autograph. I'm happy about that. Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination. This is a tome. This is a volume. This is 500.
You kill somebody with that book.
550 pages or so, but I'm telling you, you're not going to want to put this thing down. This is one of these books that is so interesting because you know Rod Serling from the Twilight Zone, but maybe if you're not a huge nut about entertainment like all of us in this room, you may not know that he was involved in lots of other things.
Sure.
Further, you're going to hear behind-the-scenes stories about what went on. But before we go to anything else...
Yeah, are we going to let Nick talk, or what's going on here? Okay.
Tell us... for those who don't know or aren't initiated, who's Rod Serling and why should we care?
Well, Rod Serling, Doug, thank you, is he was clearly the most prestigious and most honored writer in television history before The Twilight Zone. Before The Twilight Zone ever aired, Rod Serling was the top of the heap as far as television writers went. He had just won 3 consecutive Emmy Awards in 1955, 56, and 57, and The Twilight Zone debuted in 1959. So he was the most recognizable, the most outspoken, the most honored and probably the most prolific writer in television history. He wrote over 250 scripts that were produced for television or radio and feature films. And, of course, in the middle of this career, and it's remarkable how close to the exact middle of his career it was, he created probably the most influential television series of all time in The Twilight Zone. So it's an incredible career that he had, particularly in television. And I don't think there's any other television writer whose career can quite be measured in the same way that Rod Serling's can. It's really a phenomenal body of work.
Now, if you were to ask, because you've gone through, let's be clear, before I even ask this question, you've gone through a lot of unpublished manuscripts, unpublished writings. Tell us what you did to research this book.
Yes, well, the book took about 4 years of research and writing, and what I did was one thing that someone like me had an advantage, in regards to, is that Rod Serling left behind an incredible amount of material. He left behind this incredible paper trail that you can actually go through. The primary archive of Serling material is in Wisconsin. It's at the Madison State Historical Society, and Serling donated about 81 boxes of material to the Historical Society, and you can go there. You can go there and go through all of it, and it includes produced manuscripts, unproduced manuscripts. It includes correspondence, contracts, letters, all sorts of miscellanea. They just recently digitized 20,000 hours, I think, of dictabelt recordings that Rod Serling had recorded throughout his career. So it's an amazing archive of stuff. And then there are other archives. I went to that one. I went to the archive at UCLA when Rod was living in Hollywood. Basically, he donated a bunch of stuff to UCLA. So there's a bunch of stuff there. When he was teaching at Ithaca College, he donated a bunch of stuff to Ithaca College. So those were the three main archives that I went through. And then on top of that, I went to his alma mater, Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and I found some really, really interesting stuff about his college career there that I had never seen published anywhere else. So I did go through, absolutely everything that I could get a hold of, and this is it. This is what the result was. And that's why this book
has all of, is so detailed. It has, I shouldn't say all, but it has a peek into all of those sources here, which is very cool. For example, when he was speaking, and we're jumping ahead a little bit, but when he was speaking about his second or other series, The Night Gallery, later on, he was a little upset because they weren't using all of his scripts and all that. There's a note there exactly what he wrote to the, I guess you'd say the producers and or the TV station, whatever it was, and said, listen, guys, if you don't want me to write anymore, that's fine, man, because you turned down a lot of my scripts. I'll just do the narration. That's cool. And they said, no, we still want 4 more scripts from you. But I'm saying something little like that. That's in that book. It's just a little piece of it. Like, it's amazing that all that stuff is in this book to hear that.
Yeah, because Rod Serling kept all that stuff. It's amazing. He was the type of guy, he responded to every fan letter he ever received, I think. He really did. He kept it. He kept everything. He kept every fan letter he ever got, and he responded personally. I mean, personally signed letters that he sent to people. If you wrote to Rod Serling to bash him about something, he'd be more apt to respond to you. I mean, that's just the way he was. He would say, he would thank you for it. He would say, thank you for your thoughtful letter, if it was a thoughtful letter, and respond to whatever your criticism was.
And he seemed to keep his ego in check, I'm going to say, because he was very, if you see, even on YouTube, there's a lot of interviews, he always knows the names of the people that he's talking to. When he's in a group, one of them, with like 5 different students, he knows everyone's name, and he'll use their names all the time. When they respond to him in UCLA, he's doing a lecture, and somebody mistakes him or mistakes an episode that he wrote for someone else, whatever it might be, he's very what would you say, self-affecting. He's not one that's going to be a pushover either. If he didn't like an actor or didn't like something that was going on, right? The general public, he'll tell you that, right? I mean, he was pretty cool that way.
Oh, yeah. He from all, I wish I could have met him. I was 5 years old when he died, but from all indications, he was an incredibly personable guy. He liked people, so exactly what you said. When he was talking to people, he would look at them in the eye and listen to what they said. And he was never the type of guy to take the air of a star and, some kind of an attitude or something. He really did relish the interaction with students if he was teaching, or with the people in the audience if he was giving a lecture.
Exactly. And just to give a little peek into what we were talking about in the future, see if you remember this episode.
This is flight number 914 from Earth to our planet. We will be taking off in 3 minutes.
Mr. Chambers, don't get on that ship. The rest of the book. To serve men, it's a cookbook.
One of the most memorable Rod Serling episodes. I hate to cut everybody short here, but we're up against the wall of commercials here. We'll be back right after this, and everything old is new again with Nick Parisi, and we're going to dive into lots of things. But the next section, let's talk a little Twilight Zone, and then we'll talk about Rod Serling's life, work, and imagination, a book by Nick Parisi. Everything old is new again. We'll be back right after this.
There is a fifth dimension beyond that which...
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
This stop right here is Willoughby. No, it's not next stop Willoughby. This is Everything Old is New Again. David Cohen.
Doug Viviani doing a show about Rod Serling.
Who doesn't do a Rod Serling imitation, by the way?
Everybody does. even if you've never seen him, you know the imitation, and you can imitate the imitation.
I remember Dan Aykroyd's on Saturday Night Live. Remember that one?
Sure, yeah.
It was great. We're here with Nicholas Parisi, who is the author of a great book. You've got to get into reading this. It's just released on Amazon. Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination. You're going to learn about the Twilight Zone, yes, but you'll learn about a lot more, and we're going to get into all that in the next two shows. Right now, let's hear from Rod Serling himself here and speak about what are the two best Twilight Zone shows in his mind.
I thought the two best shows we did, one I wrote, one I didn't write. One was an original by Dick Matheson called The Invaders with Agnes Moorehead, which was in a sense pure science fiction with a very O. Henry-ish twist. And the other was an adaptation of mine, of Lucille Fletcher's a short story called Time Enough at Last, about a myopic bank teller who, at the end of the world, breaks his glasses just when he's able to read all that he's ever wanted to read, which was sheer, pure, beautiful irony.
So here he is on an interview, and he did lots of nice interviews and very thoughtful individual. Nicholas, did you hear some of these interviews in your research or what?
Absolutely, every one of them, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I had plenty that you are not going to find on YouTube also, yeah.
No, it's interesting that to hear the writer of an iconic show be so honest as to say, I liked these two, and of course he has some others, but these two the best, like, ask Roddenberry what's his best Star Trek. He's not going to tell you.
Well, Rod Serling, for those who don't know, he was his own worst critic. He was his own harshest critic. He was incredibly critical of his own work throughout his career, before and after the Twilight Zone and during. So he was absolutely going to give you an honest answer about things. I mean, at one point in the Twilight Zone's run, he said he summed up the series as being a third of them were shows I could be proud of, a third of them were passable, and a third of them were dogs. That was his estimation, and I think he's way off on the third being dogs.
Right.
I think he's probably right about a third of them being classics, but way more of them are perfectly fine, good shows and not dogs, you know. So yeah.
Now, he mentioned O. Henry. Was he a fan of O. Henry? Did he talk about him at all? Because there are some O. Henry type of things that he did with these endings sometimes.
Yes, he was. I'm certain he was a fan because he did mention the O. Henry-esque twist often enough to know that he was, you know, giving homage to that type of a writer.
Well, let's explain who because a lot of our listeners might not know O. Henry.
He's a writer from back in the day and had twist endings that were very thoughtful.
Known for that type
like,
of
for example,
yes.
The Honeymooners did that one show which is a twist on the O. Henry, where there was a Christmas show where they're searching and, you know, for presents, and Ralph gives up his bowling ball, and Alice in turn get money to buy Alice a gift, and meanwhile Alice bought him a bowling ball bag
or a bowling bag ball.
Of course, that wasn't the O. Henry story. There's another,
but that is the Gift of the Magi,
right.
And to bring it around, Rod Serling actually wrote an adaptation of the Gift of the Magi in the late '60s, actually after the Twilight Zone. And I honestly don't know exactly what it was written for, but it never was produced. It was.
I would love to have seen that.
Yeah.
So then, obviously, he certainly was aware of O. Henry,
yes.
And that just goes to show you a little bit. But everything old is new again. Like, certainly, I would love to have asked him, did you have in mind at least the foundation of what O. Henry did, 1800s? I
believe so.
That he did when you were. Would you have been influenced by that thought process, or the one stories you've read of that author. I don't know if we have the answer
think
to that.
I think it was a conscious decision. Maybe not. I mean, the twist was a conscious decision.
Right.
He had written twist endings before the Twilight Zone. We can get into that.
Yes.
But yeah, so he definitely had that particular in mind.
Let's just refresh our memory now as to the Invaders. Agnes Moorehead, by the way, was an actress with Orson Welles in the 30s. She was in Citizen Kane as Orson Welles' character's mom. Later, she was Bewitched as Samantha's mother in the 60s. And here she is in the Invaders. Let's see if you remember this.
Come in, Central Control. The ship's destroyed. Incredible race of giants here. Too powerful. Stay away.
What's the twist there, Nicholas Parisi?
The twist is that we believe that this woman is on Earth being attacked by aliens, and it turns out that she's on another planet being attacked by Earth astronauts.
And destroys the ship.
And destroys the ship and everything else, yes.
Now, is there anything behind the scenes that's in the book, or any discussions that his thought process in presenting this?
That particular episode, no. As he mentioned, Richard Matheson had written that one, and I believe he just took it, basically there was... Rod Serling very rarely changed anything that those writers wrote. I mean, not a word, so I'm sure he just accepted that script as it was written.
Now, was he the one in this show? He would be the first, what they call showrunner these days, right?
Exactly,
that's the famous term now.
Right.
Would he have been the one that hired either all or some of these writers?
Absolutely. He was involved in every aspect of the Twilight Zone, and he hired Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont from the get-go, and George Clayton Johnson kind of came along with them. It was almost a tag-along. So he hired them explicitly right from the beginning.
How did he know? He obviously knew them prior. Right?
Well, yes. The story is, and I do believe this, that Ray Bradbury actually suggested them to him, and he invited them to the screening of the pilot. He had written the pilot, Where Is Everybody? And he invited them to it, and they talked afterward, and they hit it off, and he just sensed that they were good for the show, and it turned out brilliant to be a brilliant decision.
And how was he a manager of them, though? You said he said to them, "Go ahead, write, give me a script." Did he ever turn them down? Did he just
edit them
changing a word?
Yeah, I got to tell you, as far as I can tell, he never turned down a script from either of those guys, and both of them, Beaumont particularly, was amazed that the shows were produced as he wrote them, without a word being changed. It was so unheard of in television, especially, the story that Charles Beaumont tells is that when he turned in his first script, which was Perchance to Dream, an episode about a man who is having a nightmare. He has a heart condition. He's having a dream about being on a roller coaster, and he can't take it because his heart is going to give out on him. And Serling told him, "Go ahead, write the story however you see it. Don't worry about the little old lady in Dubuque. She'll get it. Don't worry about her." And Beaumont says, he wrote the script thinking, "Oh, this is going to be changed. They're never going to accept it like this." And it was aired verbatim, word for word, not a word changed. So that's how he dealt with those writers.
And that's what he always wanted from his, I'm going to say bosses, but sponsors. Like, he didn't want to, he was always fighting with the sponsors to not put the can of Coke in the back, but also to be able to say what he wanted to say. And I guess that's part of the reason why he created the show.
Absolutely. Yes, to have that freedom.
Okay, so now let's take a look at what was the other one was mentioned was Time Enough at Last. If you haven't seen this one, I'm gonna ruin the ending. You gotta watch
Time Enough at Last. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. There was time now. There was all the time I needed. It's not fair.
The best laid plans of mice and men.
Here you go. And that's Burgess Meredith, of course, from Batman the Penguin, from Rocky, Mickey the Trainer, and many others. That was one of course, his most favorite presentations.
Yes, I mean, we could do a whole show on Time Enough at Last.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly one of my favorites, and it was, I would caution you about that particular clip where he says this and Invaders were his two favorites. I mean, it's kind of like when you ask John Lennon what his favorite Beatles song was, and if you don't like his answer, wait till tomorrow and ask him again. So he always had different favorites, but this was certainly one of them. And it's that ending. I mean, I get chills just from hearing a little glimpse, a clip of it there. I mean, Burgess Meredith is tremendous in it, and it's just the ending just punches you in the gut. It really is. It's
exactly
a harrowing ending.
And I did go through a number of interviews, and there was another interview. He listed like 5 shows.
Yeah.
I think it was in Los Angeles, UCLA. So you're right about that. But just for kicks, let's have a little bit of a quiz here. I've got a couple seconds left. I have 4 shows. You're going to hear David Cohen is going to go up against Nicholas Parisi, the David versus Goliath here, and we're going to see. There's a compilation of 4 clips of 4 shows. Name either the title, the star, or the ending. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
Won't somebody take a lamp or a bottle or something and end this?
You're a very bad man. He was a bad man, and you mustn't think bad thoughts about me either, or I'll do the same thing to you.
What does it say, Archie?
What did he write?
Why didn't you say something?
I knew I would not be able to keep my part of the bargain. So 1 year ago, I had the nerves to my vocal cords severed.
Now, you see, I hope. Why, you must say nothing of what you've seen and heard here.
Well, isn't it possible you might have made a mistake?
No, think of the peace of the world these last 5 years.
Let us begin to build the statue again.
I'm the god, don't you understand?
What do you got? Tiny little man.
Well, you're crushed to death.
There you go. Just some random ones. David Cohen's lost a little bit there. Sorry about that, Mr. Cohen. I'll give you the first, and I'll give you a hint. The first one.
There were 4. I don't need a hint. For the first one?
Yes.
I knew that right away.
Which is?
That was Wish Him Into the Cornfield, Bill Mooney and the kid.
It's a Good Life, right? And they did that one again in the movie, actually, right, Nicholas?
Yes, they did.
All right. How about David? The second one, did you at least recognize the voice of somebody there you may recognize from Lost in Space?
No, No, I did. Well, yeah, I mean, Mr. Smith.
Doctor. All right, so there you
Dr.
go.
Smith.
One of the actors.
But I remember the episode, but I don't remember the name of the episode.
The episode is called The Silence.
And that's a great one. He loves that one,
is.
too. He mentions that one a number of times about making the bet and then cuts his vocal cords so they can win the bet. But meanwhile, the twist is the guy that made the bet doesn't have the money to pay him off.
Right.
And then, all right, David, the third one, it's about a devil. Remember this?
Yeah. Oh, wait, about the devil?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't tell from the
John Carradine's
quotes.
got the devil locked up, and some visitor comes and doesn't believe Carradine and is convinced by the devil to release him from jail. And what happens, Nicholas, after that?
He turns out to be right. It was the devil, and he spends the rest of his life trying to recapture him.
Pretty cool.
I
do remember
That's such an underrated episode, I think.
It was probably my favorite for years and years. Right now, I'd probably put it at number 2.
What's number 1?
Wow.
Walking Distance.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that. And the last one is, they mentioned the name at the end of the episode.
Yeah, no.
Little People, which is, again, one of these where you visit a planet and people are big or small, or what happens there, Nicholas?
Well, the astronaut gets some megalomaniacal tendencies about these little people being their god, and then, of course, some giants show up and show him who's boss.
Exactly. We'll be back on Everything Old is New again. We'll continue all things, let's say, Rod Serling, and we're going to have a great time here with Nicholas Parisi, the author of Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, available everywhere.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New Again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
This is the prize-winning screenplay of Requiem for a Heavyweight by the famous writer Rod Serling. Within these pages is a gallery of some of the most provocative characters ever conceived. From the alleys and asphalt of New York City, from the fiery brilliance of 4 great stars, comes a motion picture of deep insight and crashing impact.
Not a great promo, David Cohen. I don't know if that caught your attention or
well,
not.
those promos back then, by the time they got around to telling you what they were promoting, it's like you were half asleep.
Speaking of which, we're here on Everything
Starring some of the famous blah, blah, blah. It's like, get to the point.
No excitement. That was a promo for Requiem for a Heavyweight, which was on TV with Playhouse 90 in 1956. Later on in the movie theaters with Anthony Quinn, Jackie Gleason, Mickey Rooney, Julie Harris in 62. We're here with Nicholas Parisi, the author of Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, available at Amazon.com for sure, or go to Barnes & Noble, pick it up right now. Why not? Matter of fact, while our radio show is on, walk into Barnes & Noble, nice and loud, coming out of your pocket, let's say, and promote our show as well, because this is well worth it. Because we're talking all things Rod Serling. That is a work that I think is overlooked these days. You can find Requiem for a Heavyweight on YouTube and both versions, but I think it's very interesting that we spoke a little bit before that Rod Serling had no problem calling people out, and he did not like the version that you usually see if you're going to pull this up, which is the Jackie Gleason version, which starred Anthony Quinn, because he says, it was badly directed, poorly performed except for Mickey Rooney and Jackie Gleason. I thought Tony Quinn was not right for it. He liked Jack Palance, and who gave it considerably more dignity in the live version than Tony Quinn did. And that is a direct quote right out of the book, Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination. Nicholas, what's that about?
Yeah, Requiem for a Heavyweight, I think was, we talked about what his favorite Twilight Zone episodes were before, but Requiem for a Heavyweight, I think, is without question Rod Serling's favorite piece of work that he did. He loved the script, and he loved the original Playhouse 90 performance with good reason. It really is a brilliant script, and it was a brilliant performance by Jack Palance. But yes, his affection for it did not quite extend to the movie, and I tend to agree with him. I think that Tony Quinn was just wrong for the part it was in, and he was the weak link in that movie. And when you're the star and you're the weak link of the movie, it kind of, the movie falls apart around it. But having said that, I do like the feature film version as well. I like the TV version better, but I think the feature film has a lot of things going for it as well. It's just not quite as effective as the TV version.
I can see that, but I still think it's worthwhile.
Is the TV version available to see?
Yes, it's YouTube has it, and in fact, they restored it. So look for Playhouse 90 Requiem for a Heavyweight. It'll come right up.
Doug, do you remember they played that in high school? Do you remember? In school, they played...
Which
version?
In
the auditorium. I think it was Jack Palance. I remember him in it. In the high school auditorium, they had that. You and I went to see it. Yeah.
And what did we think?
It was great. Yeah, sure.
Wow. How about that for a problem with my memory? But I always have loved it. Maybe that's where it came from. And there were some Rod Serlings where he talked about boxers, one with a mechanical boxer, another one with a gentleman that was retiring as a boxer, and a little boy was praying for him. So he had an affinity for boxing unto itself.
He did. He did some boxing himself when he was in the military. He was a featherweight boxer, and he did pretty well actually. And he always had an affection for boxers because he felt that they were perfect vehicles to tell this type of story about anybody who has dedicated their life to one particular pursuit, and then they get to the point where they just can't do that anymore, and now what do they do? Who are they at that point? So he found a way to tell these stories through those particular characters.
And a lot of them have a lot of heart. A lot of episodes do, of course. But the episodes with the boxers, maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed to put forward, a presentation that these people are perfect to show a sad, but also maybe a side of their life, but also a turnaround with something can change and make things better for them. Yes,
and he did like the dichotomy, the fact that you're in this brutal sport and yet you have a gentleness to you and an inner dignity that he could show through those characters.
That's a great way to put it. That's why you're the author. Here we go. Let's take a listen to Rod Serling on Dennis Hopper. I thought this was very interesting and very straightforward.
I remember the show vividly. It was called He's Alive. No, I thought it was one of the best written scripts, completely pissed away by the performance of Dennis Hopper. I must tell you this in utter frankness, and I'll say it to Mr. Hopper as well. It was a most uncontrolled, undisciplined performance, which took considerably more thespic talent than the young man had at the time. It needed a very restrained performance, and Dennis started to cry in reel one, and there was simply emotionally no place to go.
So he was,
what was he talking about?
He was talking about an episode called He's Alive. It was one of the hour-long episodes of the 4th season that Rod particularly liked. And, yeah, he liked the script. He didn't like Dennis Hopper's performance, obviously.
I think it was something with Hitler feeding words into this character.
It's about a neo-Nazi rabble-rouser who is becoming better at his craft, so to speak, because he's taking kind of direction from this ghost-like figure in the shadows, and you find out that the ghost-like figure in the shadows is the ghost of Adolf Hitler, who's giving them these, pep talks on how to do this.
But if you look at it, we'll talk about the actors in next week's show that he worked with. But I can't help but say, Dennis Hopper is very revered these days, and he's done lots of movies and Apocalypse Now and so forth. But not everybody's perfect. But he wasn't afraid to say it right out, and I think he was right about what do we know? But what do I know? But he was right about what I've heard him say about most actors, positive and negative. He seemed to be in tune, not only as a writer, but as a larger figure, as a I guess you're going to say a critic, but as someone that's attuned to acting.
Sure, and especially when we're talking about the Twilight Zone as a producer, because he was the one who hired Dennis Hopper. I'm sure. Well, but there's a whole other story. But in the 4th season, he wasn't quite as involved in the series as he had been. But yeah, so he saw him in that frame of mind also.
Now he also was involved with writing the screenplay for someone else's work, but it was very interesting, the dialogue that he is able to present in something called 7 Days in May, which starred Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, Frederick March in 1964. Listen to a little bit about this, and again, this is something that you really should listen to. It's even relevant to this day, I think.
This is the astounding story of a military plot to overthrow the government of the United States.
Are you sufficiently up on your Bible to know who Judas was?
Yes, I know who Judas was. He was a man I worked for and admired until he disgraced the 4 stars on his uniform.
Now, the New York Times said about that, in a sense, Rod Serling's excellent screenplay is a hymn to American democracy. It mixes inspiration with excitement, confidence, and fear, and concludes that we, the people, should be vigilant but not afraid. Now, he won a Writers Guild Award for that. You tell me, this is something that I think is overlooked these days, no?
It is. And when we're talking about Rod Serling, again, the interesting thing just about his body of work in its totality is that he is so tied to the Twilight Zone that everything else is overlooked. You know, he's one of these people who there are people who will be amazed that he wrote anything other than the Twilight Zone. So that's incredible. And with 7 Days in May in particular, yeah, this is one that does not deserve to be overlooked. This is a classic film, a great film. And the amazing thing to me about 7 Days in May, about the screenplay, is that when Rod Serling wrote this, it was after the 3rd season of the Twilight Zone, and the Twilight Zone was not immediately renewed for the 4th season. And he went back to Antioch College in Yellow Springs. He wanted to take a break. He took a sabbatical, and he went to teach. He went to teach at Antioch. And while he was there, oh, by the way, he cranked out the screenplay for 7 Days in May, easily the finest screenplay of his career. So it's an amazing testament to just his work ethic and just how productive he was.
Exactly. And he wasn't immune to what was going on around him. He knew all about what was happening in the various fields of especially science fiction, including Star Trek.
Star Trek, I thought, was again a very inconsistent show, which at times sparkled with true ingenuity and pure science fiction approaches, and other times was more carnival-like and very much more the creature of television than the creature of a legitimate literary form.
So, and I don't disagree with that. The 3rd season of Star Trek was poor, and he was talking about the project in general. Again, he's talking about someone else's work. Gene Roddenberry was respected in the time. He didn't have a problem doing that. Rod Serling, when he passed away, Gene Roddenberry in California did a eulogy for Rod Serling and said no one could know Serling or view or read his work without recognizing his deep affection for humanity, his enthusiastic curiosity about us, and his determination to enlarge our horizons by giving us a better understanding of ourselves. So even though he had criticism of fellow people in the industry, they certainly respected what he had to say. And by the way, I got all this from this book. You need to know that.
Well, he wasn't going to trash him at his eulogy. I mean,
well, why was he asking? Why did he even do it? If someone trashes you, why would you do the eulogy if you didn't care about him?
They were friends. He and Roddenberry, and we should point out that directly before that quote that you gave, Serling was trashing his own show because he was saying that the Twilight Zone was a mixed bag, and sometimes it was great, sometimes it wasn't. So he said, yeah, Star Trek, same thing. It was a mixed bag. Sometimes it was great, sometimes it wasn't. So he would trash himself, and he would trash other people.
So I think the message: it's nothing wrong with being honest.
Exactly.
It's your straightforward opinion.
And I'm getting the impression, Nick, that if Rod was alive today and in tune with culture and what's happening, he'd be big on Twitter, and I mean, he would not be afraid to speak his mind.
Oh, well, no, Rod Serling was never afraid to speak his mind. I mean, he thought it was his obligation to speak his mind, especially as an artist, but even more basically as a citizen. He thought if you told him, don't talk about politics or religion, he would say, you're a fool. Yeah, of course I'm going to talk about politics or religion. It's what's important. I'm going to speak my mind. If you want to listen to it, that's fine, but I'm going to speak my mind. That's what he was all about.
We're going to continue speaking our mind on all things Rod Serling right after this. Everything old do again.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
I'm not a writer, but I've got this idea, and if you could just write it. Well, that's not the key question. The key question is, can you sit down and write it? And then, of course, they're hung up by style and technique, which is hardly of the essence. It's story that counts. It's heart, it's feeling, it's reality. It's the capacity for the printed word or the spoken word to move you. These are the key things.
Oh, that's Rod Serling himself talking about people coming up to him and saying, I got a great idea. Could you just write it for me? Like, that's not, we all have great ideas. What he's saying, I think, is pretty significant, is go ahead and write it. Nick Parisi is here with us, and he's written Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, a great, great book. Nicholas, what do you take away from that comment?
Well, that is, you put it perfectly, is that's one of the writers, one of the dreaded, things that writers get approached with all the time, because people who don't write think that the idea is the big thing, like, oh, I got this great idea. Well, writers have ideas constantly. Writers get ideas all day long. They do not need your ideas. The hard thing is sitting down and putting it on paper. I mean, Rod Serling, I think in that same quote, he says the easiest thing in the world to do is to get an idea. The hardest thing to do is to put it down on paper. So that's what he was talking about.
Right. He says something like, it wasn't his quote, but he loves the idea of somebody who says, writing's not difficult. I go into my office, I put paper into the typewriter, and I bleed. and that's part of it. I think that he also was very prophetic at times. He really knew science fiction, and he knew literature. He knew, of course, the field that he was in. It wasn't a mistake. But listen to what he has to say about a young... let's leave it a secret and see who can think about who is he talking about here.
And this old saw of science fiction appealing only to a small coterie of intellectuals or non-intellectuals, whichever the case may be, is simply phony, because 2001 is a case in point. One of the big grossers that Metro released this rather obscure film shot by a kid, I think, who originally went to UCLA. Equinox? THX, big box office smash. Very, very successful film.
David Cohen, do you know who he was talking about? THX 1138 is the movie.
I mean, no, I don't.
Kind of looks like you a little bit.
There you go. Yeah, with the beard. Drum roll. Star Wars creator himself, George Lucas.
Really.
So in 72, he's at a lecture in, I think, UCLA, and he's bringing this up. Nicholas.
Yeah, I'm glad you played that, because I was impressed by that as well. I didn't get to quote that in the book, but yes, I mean, he recognized something in George Lucas right from the beginning. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So let's turn a little bit towards writing, and he recognized the creation of great writing. He loved literature. I think you could say that he wanted to present literature, if this makes sense, on television.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I would put it. In fact, The Twilight Zone, again, particularly. I mean, when I was a kid, I began watching The Twilight Zone when I was 9 or 10 years old. And even at that age, one of the things that appealed to me, one of the things that drew me into the show was the language, just the way the language was used. And I may not have known the word at the time, but the word was literary. It was a literary show. It was just so well written. And these people spoke in ways that you just didn't hear on other television shows. And so Rod Serling was all about that. He was about the language, and you could hear it when he speaks. I mean, Rod Serling was such an incredibly well-spoken man, because he was that thoughtful and he was that careful about using the language.
I hate to say this, when you listen to him speaking on YouTube all over the place, right? And then you listen to, I don't want you to use names, but you use some writers of television today as they're presented, if they even do it, by the way. Most of them you don't even hear from the writers. We've had him on this show, Kevin Burns, who is prolific and is well-spoken, but there's some others that aren't so much so. And I think it's interesting how, to me, it stood out like, wow, this is what we need to hear more of from all writers.
Yeah, just so articulate and so able to to give the essence of what the art of writing is.
Or how about, what is the obligation of a writer?
The principal obligation you have as the writer is to go to a climax which interests and excites, and if it doesn't satisfy, at least makes an audience sit up and take notice of it. It must also be valid.
What does that mean? Must be valid? Something the characters would do within their characteristics when faced with an unusual circumstance?
Yeah, that's exactly what he's talking about there. He's talking about not having an ending that is contrary to what you had just developed over the course of a half an hour or an hour or whatever it may be. You can have a twist ending, but if you have a twist ending that doesn't agree with what had come before, it's not going to work. It has to be valid in terms of the character.
And we try to be creative. Sometimes we do characters, we do different things, quizzes, whatever on this show. We try to be creative. I don't know if this will ring a bell for us or not, but let's hear what he has to say about creativity itself.
Creativity is an altogether personal thing. It's an art that cannot be taught normally. It's a demanding, frustrating, challenging facet of the human experience. The instinct of creativity must be followed by the act, the physical act of putting it down for a sense of permanence.
Well, it doesn't make any sense if you're creative in your own mind and you don't tell anybody the joke, right? That makes sense.
It does.
I just told myself a really funny joke, but it doesn't mean anything because I didn't express it out
It's
loud.
only funny to you because you didn't tell it to us, right? But David Cohen, I mean, does that speak to you at all with respect to being creative? Because you're a very, I think, creative individual.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Yeah. So, does that speak to you or no?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely does. I think sometimes you're afraid as an artist to be bold or to do something maybe outside your comfort zone because you're afraid of the reaction to it and the criticism that might happen. But I think a true artist has to break through that barrier and just express whatever they feel is inside them, and however it spills out, that's what it is, and that's you.
And Nicholas Parisi, author of Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, do you think that the 3 Emmys that he won before starting the Twilight Zone may have given him the confidence to fight for these scripts as he wanted them written, or was it just in his personality from day one when he grew up in Binghamton?
Yes and no. I think the first part of it is absolutely correct. Not just winning the 3 Emmys, but just developing the prestige and the stature where he could say, okay, now I'm going to do what I really want to do, and you're not going to be able to tell me, so much, what I should do because I have the name now and I have the success and I can do this. So it definitely it also gave him the financial freedom too. He didn't have to worry about losing. He was already a well-off guy at that point. So he could take some risks, and he was going to address issues like prejudice, and if they fought him on it, he'd fight back. He'd probably lose, but he would fight back and he would do that. But the instinct to do that was with him right from the beginning. It's just that he really couldn't do it to this level until he got to that level of fame.
Right, but he had the gravitas to make that part of his life, let's say, and his life's work from Twilight Zone on, if you will, or maybe even a little before. So let's talk about the soul. You talk about social issues. What does he have to say about writing about social issues?
What are you dealing with now in terms of plot points? The world and everything in it. Hunger, poverty, the anguish of the human race. Of course you're going to over-concern yourself with issues. It's right that you should do so this year, next year, but not 3 years from now. Leave that soapbox behind. Carry with you at all times your sense of caring and your concern, but put it into the mouths of flesh and blood people.
Nicholas, what is he speaking of here?
Well, the first point I would point out is that he's speaking to a college class there. So he was teaching writing to a college course. So what he was saying to them is, you can be that way now. You're in college and next year, but once you get out of here, leave that behind and start to write real flesh and blood people who can put forth these ideas. So again, Rod Serling believed that if you're going to write, you have to write about something. You have to write about issues, and it didn't have to be the issues that he was concerned about, and it didn't have to be from the same point of view that he would take. He just believed that one way or the other, you should be writing about something, and you want to make it entertaining, and you want to put it into characters that people can care about, but it should still say something. So he's telling these college kids, you're concerned. I mean, this was during the Vietnam War. He's talking to these college kids. So listen, you're concerned about pollution, you're concerned about prejudice, you're concerned about war, and you're going to write about these things. Do it, but make sure that you do it believably with believable characters.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I also want to ask you, though, along the lines, I don't know that he's ever wrote anything that didn't have a point of view, a meaning, whether it be a morality play, whether it be just a word, whether it be something with social meaning, or whether it's something that was one of his common themes. Do you think that may be the reason, or one of the reasons for his success, in that he wasn't a writer that was going to write I Dream of Jeannie, and that, I don't mean to pick on, but it's just a fluff piece. Everything if he wrote I Dream of Jeannie, he would write Why is Jeannie Not Free? Or
I would have
like
loved
that.
to have seen him write an episode of I Dream of Jeannie. That would have been cool.
It would be great, because he would bring out the social problem or not, whatever's going on in that arrangement, and try to raise an issue, right? I mean,
he would almost be. He would almost be unable to avoid that, doing that. He would have to. That's just his
And then
nature.
was that part of the success? Do you think America enjoyed that? And if they did not, why not?
Well, I think that it was part of his success in terms of it built his reputation. I mean, these stories about him fighting for certain scripts like Noon on Doomsday and A Town Is Turned to Dust, they were not behind the scenes little squabbles. He went to the media, and the media covered these stories. So the population, they knew about these stories, and I think it built his reputation, gave him the nickname "Television's Angry Young Man," and even if he didn't get a chance to tell those stories the way he wanted to, the people knew that he wanted to, and then again, when he got to the Twilight Zone, he was able to do it in the form of allegory and analogy.
And we've had a great time here with Nicholas Parisi. Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, available Amazon.com. Go to Barnes & Noble, any bookstore, you're going to see it there. It's a great book. Go to Facebook, see Rod Serling Dimensions, and you can see the Facebook page. And the website is rodserling.com, right? rodserling.com.
That is for the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation.
There we go. So we'll be back next week to talk more things Rod Serling. You're going to enjoy this. Stay tuned to Everything Old is New Again. And we'll be back. Nicholas Parisi, Douglas Viviani, and David Cohen. Everything Old is New Again.